Since the beginning of time, nature has been a part of us. It has stood alongside us through our best times and through our worst. It has seen us through wars, through victories, through natural disasters, through celebrations, and through civil unrest. Nature tends to take on a persona in the minds of people. To some, nature stands as a silent observer. To others, a force of solidarity. To others, a resource only to be taken advantage of. We have reached the age that conservation leaders such as Aldo Leopold were afraid of, where people would rather stay home than spend time in nature. They would rather spend time on their phone watching others in the outdoors than do it themselves, all while our natural places are destroyed and developed in the name of progress. This attitude is like a virus, sweeping over our natural places with no one paying any attention to the fallout. But, as with most things, it takes a wake-up call to bring people to their senses. 2020 brought with it COVID-19, a virus that spread like wildfire across the globe, quickly being recognized among the scientific community as a global pandemic. With nothing to stop infections, political orders were sent out across the United States with orders to stay home and to stay away from large groups of people. Masks were mandated for essential workers, and social distancing guidelines were set in place. Cities virtually shut down, but people couldn't stay home forever. With nowhere else to go, people began looking to their backyards and to the wilderness beyond. And all of a sudden, there was hope.
Hi, I'm Rocky Nason. I teach in the Department of Biology at Anderson University. I'm an associate professor of biology, and I concentrate on environmental science and environmental issues and ecology, and have been very interested over the years in the therapeutic benefits of spending time in natural settings. So I think one of the things that draws people back to nature in times of stress, like a pandemic, is, for one, they have more time on their hands and they're really limited in what they can do. And fortunately, the outdoors is still pretty accessible with physical distancing and whatnot. The other thing is, I think any time of stress, we're looking for something that grounds us, and we're looking for things that make things seem to be okay again. So I think people are having those kinds of experiences. It brings us back to what's real, and a connection with being a part of the natural world, as opposed to apart from, that we frequently are in our day-to-day lives.
My name's Ty Whitaker. I'm a pediatrician by training. I'm a husband, a father, a blacksmith, beekeeper, and a backpacker. At the very beginning of COVID, not knowing if I was going to be quarantined away from my family, I was thinking the best place for it to happen would be here in my blacksmith shop. Then also not knowing how quarantines were going to go, thought that I would have even more time to spend on the trail. Had started section hiking the Appalachian Trail a few years ago, but had gotten back into it about January, and then COVID hit in March. And then after COVID hit and they started locking everything down, one of the most surprising things that they locked down was the Appalachian Trail. And they closed the trail from Georgia to Maine. The concern being a group of people that were moving from town to town, potentially spreading this novel coronavirus all the way into these small towns that had possibly less access to medical care in the Appalachia. So they closed it, and it's just recently reopened. My wife and I have started doing it together. She doesn't hike with me, but she's my logistician, and she helps me plan and goes with me. She's my logistics crew, my ground crew. She's my safety net. She knows where I am, what I'm doing. I can communicate with her, even if we don't have cell signal through satellite communication. So it's just a really neat thing to do together. I'm not a very fast hiker because I enjoy being out there. I'm not out there trying to set speed records. I'm out there to enjoy the trail. So many of the people that I've hiked with in the past miss it because they're just, all they really want to do is hike it fast and get to camp and then rest. I rest along the way. I take a lot of pictures, and the main reason I take pictures is because I want to remember it, but my wife is, she's my best friend, and she's not able to be on the trail with me, so I can take the trail to her. I actually do video of different sections of the trail so she can see what it's like when I'm hiking it. So this is the top of this bald, and the view is just amazing out there. There's 360 degrees of it. It's beautiful. Because I want her to hear the snow crunch under my boots and to see the narrowness of the trail, or to see the tunnel of rhododendron that I'm getting to walk through and under. But it's also the place of general revelation of our God, and it's probably, especially since COVID-19 has hit and it's impacted our ability to worship with our faith family. It's been the one place that I've been able to truly worship. And that's always been the case. I've done some of my best worship in a deer stand, but here lately it's been more on the trail.
For some, reconnecting with nature during COVID-19 was as simple as taking a step outside their back door. T. Scott Sillett from the Smithsonian's Migratory Bird Center says that more people reached out to him than ever about how loud the birds were during the pandemic. Needless to say, the birds are no louder. People are just paying closer attention to the wilderness around them. But what is the wilderness?
For one, there's a legal definition of wilderness, and there's legislation called the Wilderness Act that specifically defines wilderness in legal terms. And there is all kinds of terminology there about it being areas that are untrammeled by humans, and I'm paraphrasing, where humans are visitors, not residents. Some people have said, if there aren't animals there that can kill you, then it's not wilderness. So that might be taking it a bit too far, but something just with mostly a natural environment with very little built environment around it.
Not only are there varying definitions of what constitutes wilderness, but there's a broad variety of ways that people engage with the outdoors. Some through hiking, some through gentle observation from their back porch, some through interacting with the wildlife that share these natural spaces.
My name is Raul Whitaker. I'm a hunter and fisherman. COVID-19 has affected my everyday life. I think it's taken its toll on relationships and people's relationships with each other and with big groups of people. And I think when you're not socializing like you would normally, that's gonna affect your relationships with people that you used to be close to. So I'm sure it's affected friendships and relationships and families. Hunting and fishing has helped me through COVID-19 just by giving me something to do. It was an easy way for me to get away from the house, because that was all I had when COVID hit. You were basically on house arrest, everybody was. So it was the way I could get out, clear my head, talk to God. And then as it went on, when I couldn't hang out with my friends because of COVID, when they loosened the COVID guidelines a little bit, it made it where I could go out and hang out with my friends and still abide by the socially distanced rules and the big group rules, because you could still go out and walk around in the woods with your buddies.
Hunting licenses and permits skyrocketed during the COVID-19 quarantine as people desperately sought out ways to get out of the house and experience nature in a new way. Some states saw a 60% increase in permit sales compared to previous years.
I got started fly fishing. My dad was always a fly fisherman growing up, and I always saw that. I thought it was a cool thing. It was more of even when I was really little, I saw it more of as an art form and less as just trying to reel in fish. Even though reeling fish to me is really fun as well. I've done everything I can with a fly rod other than saltwater, but I've been back to Watauga a couple times in Blue Ridge, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Upper South Carolina. I've really enjoyed fly fishing. It's a whole new art. It's a whole new ball game. It's completely different than rod and reel fishing. It's timing. It's pressure. It's everything. Everything's different. Everything's more sensitive. So it's just a new challenge. Some of the most memorable moments I've had during COVID was hunting with my buddies. We woke up at 3:30 every morning. Every morning that we could go. We woke up staying in some flooded timber just to barely see ducks. The majority of the time we wouldn't even shoot our guns, but it was just something about being out there with those boys just kept drawing me out and wanting me to keep going, because they kept me accountable, but it also kept it fun. Obviously, I would have never even thought about going that much if they weren't there, and if we didn't have all the memories and the fun. I think just it got me through it. It would have been really hard without that, because I wouldn't have had the relationships, and the relationships wouldn't have stayed the way they were. I don't know what I would have done without it. I sat at home a lot. I honestly don't know. It's just what I do. So.
But interacting with wildlife is not exclusive to hunting and fishing. During COVID-19, people found other ways to interact with wildlife in the outdoors, sometimes even working in tandem with that wildlife.
Beekeeping was the one thing that it really didn't affect very much. We started off as it being a project for a group of boys to participate in, so that was the one thing that it did impact, because we couldn't get those boys together to help with the whole process. But my oldest son and I had planned to do this for a while, and so we really poured a lot of time and effort into it. Here again, the general revelation of seeing how complex our God made even these small insects, and how they interact with each other and how they survive. And then the fact that they can survive and produce something that we find value in to consume and to enjoy the taste of, and to sell and be able to make money doing it.
Honey sales for local beekeepers soared during COVID-19 as people sought out this valuable, healthy, and naturally produced treat to brighten up their homes. But for Whitaker, as well as most beekeepers like him, it's not just about the honey. It's about relationships with the bees.
And I was able to spend hours every week going through looking for queens and making sure that there was no signs of disease, and making sure that that the hives were set up like they should be, and that we didn't need to be feeding more or feeding less, and all those kind of things. So it was really helpful to have a distraction. I guess that's the word. So a distraction, but also one that helped me refocus on really what was important, because a lot of the stuff, even with this pandemic that has been very important and very devastating to a lot of people, it really just kind of got the stuff out of the way for a brief while.
The peace and the beauty of natural spaces and the wildlife within it have been a place of escape for some. But for others, it has been a place of growth.
My name's Ellie Ryan, and I am a junior at Anderson. I'm a Human Development Family Studies major. On a personal level, nature has actually not always been important to me. As a kid, I actually was super aversive to nature. And so now, that's kind of changed a little bit. So as I entered college, I kind of started reconciling some of those anxious tendencies with nature, and have kind of renewed a sense of myself within nature by kind of just confronting that, and that has a lot to do with my COVID story actually. I was in quarantine from Thanksgiving Day to Christmas Day and so I just got so overwhelmed, and I sat there and I was like, okay, it's assessment time. I can either lay here and feel sorry for myself every single day, or my other alternative is to go outside, because that's legitimately the only other place I can go, and find something to do there. And so I made it a goal for myself to do 1 week of hikes that were 45 minutes from my house.
In Ryan's home state of South Carolina, there are 7 national parks, 47 state parks, and hundreds of other hiking trails, most of them in the South Carolina upstate. Some of these locations, such as Jones Gap State Park, have seen a surge of activity during COVID-19, with some parks having to limit the number of visitors to maintain the safety of hikers and campers, and to protect the well-being of the trail. But it's hard to keep people away from the beauty of these trails and the respite they provide.
There's some kind of beauty that pairing my physical body forward and putting myself in a new physical environment, and also putting myself in physical movement like helps push and prompt my emotional world to like come forward, like my physical world is coming forward, if that makes sense. And so like that's why it's so special to me, because I think those memories and those times that like I am one with nature and like feel myself just like really like encapsulated by the whole experience, I am feeling like my emotional world is being prompted forward because my physical world is changing and like moving, which I think is so cool.
In recent years, scientists have found an increasing body of knowledge surrounding the healing effects of nature. But what is interesting is that people are not experiencing mere emotional healing in the outdoors, but physical healing as well.
Well, I do think there are therapeutic benefits to spending time outdoors, and there's quite a significant body of research that will back that up. It does cause physiological changes in our bodies. A lot of the effects that we have in the situations just through daily living that invoke that human stress response, a lot of the physiological changes involved in that. Spending time outdoors has been shown to help tamp those down. So there are physiological benefits, because chronically what happens is when you're living chronically in an elevated state of stress response, then that's just not good for your heart, it's not good for your blood vessels and other organs. Heart rate and blood pressure and stress hormone levels all see significant drops when people spend time outdoors. So there's definitely a physiological benefit, and with that I think comes an emotional benefit. We just feel better when we get back.
In a world ravaged by a global pandemic that forces people to isolate themselves from one another, people have faced high levels of mental and emotional distress, and with few modes of treatment, the outdoors is needed more than ever.
I want to do recreational therapy, which is basically using hobbies and different kinds of recreation, which involves nature inherently, as a modality for people to heal, especially because of COVID. Like, people are struggling, like suicide rates are going up, like domestic abuse within homes is going up. Like, there's a lot of things going on and that are attached to COVID. And if you think about it physically, a lot of the times when you have those things happening, you're also physically declining as well. Like, you're confined into one environment, you're usually like laying in your bed or staying in your house, not getting much human interaction. There's this natural draw, I think, as humans and as animals to nature because it engages all of your five senses. Like, you can look and there's such a variety of colors, like shapes and forms, like movement, and then like the smells are all different, some good, some bad, and like you can touch different, like all of your five senses, especially in those activities like hunting and fishing, like you have to pay attention and it's like a skill. Like, all of those things are engaging in a different way that those things that you have in quarantine don't offer you. And I think that that might be why there's an increase in it, just because as humans we want to engage with our environment.
People are seeing the value of this wilderness wake-up call, this refocusing away from technology toward the novelty of the outdoors. People need something to break them from the monotony of the pandemic. They need a place to congregate, a place where something feels normal.
COVID-19 has definitely affected my life in every aspect, in every area, especially professionally, which is obvious as a pediatrician during a pandemic. When it first started off, we didn't know what it was going to be. It's just all-encompassing when I'm at work or even at home, and every news report that comes out and every new number that they post of deaths and reinfections or infections and vaccinations and all these things. But when I'm out there, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to wear an N95 mask. I don't have to wear a face shield. I don't have to wear a lab coat. I don't have to worry about touching my face. All these things are just an escape. And I see it a lot even in my kids that I take care of at work. As a pediatrician, I always, when I'm doing well checkups, I'm always asking them, what activities are they involved in, and I get the common kind of answers as, well, we used to be involved in gymnastics and we used to be involved in sports, but lately we've been going fishing. or we've been going camping.
With no other way to spend time together and to gather around normal hobbies, people are exploring different activities in the atmosphere of the wilderness. And according to Dr. Rocky Nation, this produces a defogging experience in the brain.
One of the analogies I like to use is if you take a jar of muddy water and shake it up, then everything's cloudy, and then if you let it sit, then eventually all of that particulate matter starts to settle and things become clear. And anecdotally for me, that's sort of metaphorically what happens. The more time I spend outside, the less cluttered my mind seems to be, and it just seems to give you a whole lot more clarity of thought so that you can ponder bigger things and spiritual connections and with other people or with God and things like that.
This clearing of the mind, this de-stressing, serves to allow people the space to examine themselves, to reach beyond themselves, and to interact spiritually with the outside world. And in some cases, it allows them to interact with something much larger than themselves.
I think it's a way we can all connect with each other, but at a very young age I realized that was how I best worship with God. I found great value in what He would show me through nature and through the wilderness. So.
I talked to a guy on Siler's Bald, and we were talking about worshiping on the trail, and he was talking about that he had heard God speak to him on the trail, and it was years ago. And it was interesting because I thought he was going to tell me what he said, and really what he said was, I heard him because I was on this bald and I was the only one there, and I was there for an hour, and I didn't hear one thing. I didn't hear a leaf rustle. I didn't hear wind. I didn't hear anything. And that was him speaking to me.
I remember sitting on top of a mountain, this is a memory, with my best friend at the very beginning of all of the COVID stuff before I'd ever went to quarantine. I think it was months before. One of my favorite places near my house. It's like 20 minutes. But I remember sitting there and I just was like, Bailey, it's crazy to me how all of these like trees, even though sometimes there's winter, like they're always still there and like look beautiful, and like the sunset every single day like comes back and looks literally gorgeous, even if it's different. Like the clouds come and sit at the same place every time, and the way that light catches on the mountains is so beautiful every single day. And I'm just like, it's crazy to me how constant those things are and continue to keep just being beautiful, and like we have such a lack of trust that will happen for us. And I'm just like, how silly are we to think that that's not true for us, and that like that isn't hopeful for us. Like that's just nature. Like imagine for creation, like those things always return to something that is beautiful and stable. She just sat there and thought about it for a little bit, and she was like, yeah, everything God does is about renewal. And I mean, it changed so much. Like my interactions with nature were less about me and more about what was around me, and like just being renewed and being one with nature, as they say. But like actually like being one with my environment and realizing like I'm the same as this, like I'm continuing to be renewed, and like there is hope within this because I am a part of this.
There is hope. Despite the craziness and the fear of this pandemic, there is hope in the renewing power of the wilderness. And there is hope for our natural spaces too, despite our human tendency to destroy them. If we let it, this new wave of environmental awareness brought about by COVID-19 can serve as a beacon for hope in the restoration and preservation of our wild areas, if people are willing to help.
I think as soon as things start really opening back up, a lot of people are going to gravitate back to their normal practices and hanging out in restaurants and going to movies and things like that. My hope is that enough people have gotten a taste of the resource and asset that our natural areas are, that they'll continue to do those kinds of things. So I like to think some good is going to come of this, and one of the things that I also hope it does is I hope that it will convince people the the need that we have for protected natural areas, and that they do have value.
I do think everyone should be involved in nature in some way or form. I think it was one of the first things us humans could do. I think you should be connected to nature and the wilderness somehow. I think that's a great way to connect to our Creator. Whether that's hiking, hunting, fishing. I don't think everything's for everybody. I don't think everybody wants to hunt or fish. That's fine, but I do think everybody should have some time or some way to get away from everything and get out in nature and just connect.
A lot of the times when things happen like this, like, we're really selfish in the way that we think, and I think nature has this really special way of pulling us out of that, because there's so many things that are like novel and like stimulating in nature, like on all 5 sense ranges, and so like we can't help as human beings to not pay attention to them, and so it just brings us out of paying attention to ourselves a little bit, which I think is really good, especially during COVID and COVID fatigue.
I think nature is important and should be more important in our society. I think it's gotten a lot more important as this pandemic has hit. We've become a society that's so focused on technology and our phones, and it's just nice to see people in a normal environment, because what we've been in is not normal. It may be usual, but it's not normal.
To maintain this relationship, it will take work, but it's worth it for our wild places, for the places that have stood alongside us since the beginning, for the places that have brought us through a global pandemic, for the places that have saved us.
Hopefully people recognize the value of natural areas, and there is tremendous benefit from having natural areas to visit, both from a physiological, therapeutic aspect, spiritual benefit, but we've got to protect those areas. And if we don't become voices for protection, then they're not going to get protected.
We have to fight for our wild places so that they can take care of us. We have to fight for the wilderness like our lives depend on it, because they do.